Chapter 4, Study Guide, Part 2. Number 8. We're graphing Part A. I need you to recognize the negative reflection over the x-axis. 3 is the amplitude, and this is going to give us the period, where it starts, where it ends. We're going to put it between 0 and 2 pi and solve for x. To solve for x, you need to add pi over 4, add pi over 4, and add pi over 4, which gives us a period that starts at pi over 4, it ends at 9 pi over 4. The distance from here to here gives you the period, and in this case is 2 pi. Let's go ahead and graph it. I already have the graph here. And so to graph it, I know the amplitude is going to go as high as 3, as low as -3. It's going to start at pi over 4, and it's going to go all the way to 9 pi over 4. In order for us to select 5 key points, we need the midpoint. The midpoint is 5 pi over 4. The midpoint of this interval is going to give us 3 pi over 4. And the midpoint of the upper interval is 7 pi over 4. Sine of pi over 4 is going to give us 0. Sine of 3 pi over 4 is going to give us a 3. Sine of 5 pi over 4 is 0. Sine of 7 pi over 4 is going to give us -3. And sine of 9 pi over 4 is going to give us a 0. Now this is how a sine function should look like. What we want to do is this sine function, we want to reflect it over the x-axis. Now to reflect this function over the x-axis, this is what we want to do. If the point happened to be on the x-axis, it stays there. If it is 3 pi over 4 comma 3, it's going to reflect and become 3 pi over 4 -3. And this point is on the x-axis, it reflects itself. Now 7 pi over 4 -3, it reflects over the x-axis, becomes 7 pi over 4 comma +3. And this point is on the x-axis, it stays. Part B. Part B, graphing a cosine function. Let's see, the -1 here tells us we're going to shift down by 1 unit. This is going to give us the period, so we're going to put it between 0 and 2 pi and solve for x. To solve for x, you're going to add 3 pi, and you're ending up with 3 pi less than or equal to 2x less than or equal to 5 pi. To solve for x, we're going to end up dividing by 2, and this one is going to go from 3 pi over 2 all the way to 5 pi over 2. The length of the period, the distance from here to here, is going to give us the period, which is in this case a pi. Let's go ahead and graph. Okay, to graph this function, the amplitude is 1. So we're going to go from 1 to -1. We're going to start at 3 pi over 2, and we're going to go all the way to 5 pi over 2. We're going to break up our intervals into 5 key points. The first midpoint is going to be at 2 pi. The second midpoint is going to be at 7 pi over 4. You're just finding the midpoints, and this one will be 9 pi over 4. Since we are doing the cosine, before we shift it down, cosine of 3 pi over 2, if you were to plug it in, it gives you a 1. 7 pi over 4 is 0. 2 pi is going to give you a -1. 9 pi over 4 is 0, and 5 pi over 2 will give you a 1. This is the cosine function. What we want to do is this cosine function, we're going to shift it down by 1 unit. So we're going to go ahead and shift the x-axis down by 1 unit. If this point were to drop 1 by 1 unit, the ordered pair will be 3 pi over 2, 0. If this were to drop 1 by 1, it becomes 7 pi over 4, -1. This point right here was 2 pi and -1. If you drop it by 1, it will become 2 pi -2. This one is going to drop by 1 unit. It will become 9 pi over 4, -1. And finally, this point drop it 1. It will be 5 pi over 2, 0. My final graph should look something like this. Just make sure you have labeled 5 key points. This is the first, that is the second, this is the third key point, that's the fourth, and the last key point is up here. 5 key points properly labeled. Part C. The +2 tells you to go up 2. This is going to give us the period that's going to go between 0 and 2 pi. To solve for x, we're going to divide by 3. And so this period is going to go at 0 all the way to 2 pi over 3. The length of this period from here to here is only 2 pi over 3. It's the distance from 0 to 2 pi over 3. Okay, let's graph. This graph is going to have an amplitude of 1. So it's going to go as high as 1, as low as -1, before we shift it up by 2. This is going to start at 0 and all the way to 2 pi over 3. So we're going to find the 5 key points by keep locating the midpoints. The midpoints will be pi over 3. This midpoint will be pi over 6. This midpoint will be pi over 2. We have 5 key points. Now, to graph a sine function, the sine of 0 will be 0. At pi over 6 is going to go up to 1. At pi over 3 is going to come back to 0. At pi over 2 is going to go to -1. And at 2 pi over 3 it's going to go to 0. We're going to shift this graph to 2. So we're going to have the x-axis now up at 2. And those 5 key points going to shift up by 2. 0 is going to shift up to 2. The ordered pair will be 0, 2. That's my first key point. This point was when here, pi over 6 and 1 shifted up by 2 will become pi over 6, 3. Next, we have pi over 3, 0 shifted up by 2. It becomes pi over 3, 2. Next, we are at pi over 2, -1. If you shift it up by 2, it becomes pi over 2, 1. Last, but we have 2 pi over 3. If we shift it up by 2, it becomes 2 pi over 3, comma 2. And that's your final graph. Graphing a tangent function. That's part C. The first thing you want to do, take x over 3 and put it between -pi over 2 and +pi over 2. Do not put an equal on the inequality. These are your asymptote. To solve for x, we're going to multiply by 3. This function is going to go, this period, from 3 pi over 2 all the way to +3 pi over 2. That means the length of the period from here to here is 3 pi. Let's go ahead and graph it. Okay, this period is going to start at -3 pi over 2 all the way to +3 pi over 2. You know those going to be asymptotes. And you know the distance between those two is 3 pi. That's the length of the period. We're going to repeat it for an extra period because it's a tangent function. My next asymptote will be, what is 3 pi over 2 plus 3 pi will be 9 pi over 2. All right, now the midpoint, we know it's going to be an x-intercept. The midpoint is an x-intercept. This midpoint is 0. This midpoint right here is 3 pi. So we know the graph is going to cross here and cross there. Now what I want you to do is label the other midpoints. So take your time and find those midpoints for me. This will be -3 pi over 4. This midpoint will be 3 pi over 4. This midpoint will be 9 pi over 4. And this midpoint will be 15 pi over 4. What we want to do, we want to select one of those blue points, the midpoints, and test it. And when we go ahead and test it, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go and say, okay, let's test x is equal to 3 pi over 4. We want to plug it back into the initial function, y equal -3 tangent of x over 3, but x is 3 pi over 4 divided by 3. That gives us negative 3 tangent of pi over 4, which gives us negative 3 times 1, which is negative 3. So the ordered pair, if you have this x and this is what y is, the ordered pair will be 3 pi over 4, negative 3. Let's go ahead back to the graph and see where that point is. So if I go back to the graph and I say 3 pi over 4 gave me negative 3. So this is a point right here where the graph is going to cross. This is negative 3, this is 3 pi over 4. Here it's going to go, obviously because it's symmetrical, it's going to go up to positive 3. So my graph technically is supposed to come here, cross there, and go near the asymptote. We're going to cut and paste and repeat it again. So if this negative 3 pi over 4 went up to 3, I'm assuming 9 pi over 4 is going to go up to positive 3 as well. 15 pi over 4 is going to go down to negative 3. And if I cut and paste that graph, it's going to look exactly like that. So the point we need to labels are, the asymptote are important. Those are your asymptote. The x-intercept, they're going to be the 0 and the 3 pi. Those are your x-intercepts. This point right here, we have to label it as negative 3 pi over 4, comma 3. This point right here is 9 pi over 4, comma 3. Now down here, we're going to do 3 pi over 4, negative 3. And this point right here, it's going to be 15 pi over 4, comma, negative 3. Those are all the key points that you need to keep in mind. The x-intercept, the asymptote, and 4 additional points. Continue part 3.